I am part of the United Church of Christ, which we were having a conversation earlier, and it's the old Puritan movement that arrived in New England, right? And it's the successive organization that later on becomes the United Church of Christ. And I lift that up because one of the things is that we are one of the few denominations right now that has passed and made a call for divestiture from all companies having anything to do with Israel at this point. And because we made that decision as a denomination, there's been all kinds of pressure from every single other religious organization that you can imagine in the country. People who normally would not pay attention to somebody's denominational meeting sent around representatives to try to derail that vote before that vote happened. But it is a vote that has happened, and it is part of the United Church of Christ's program and agenda at this point in regards to Israel. So I was glad that you lifted that up, because one of the things that is important for us is that what is going on in Gaza, yes, it's a political issue, but for many of us, it also speaks to our basic value system as people who live in the world. And that basic value system has to do with whether we actually regard all human beings as creations of God. And if we regard all human beings as creations of God, then all human beings need to be afforded the dignity, the freedom, and the rights as every other creature that claims to be created by God. We cannot make any differentiation because somebody's Muslim or somebody's Christian or somebody's Buddhist or somebody's Hindu or any other faith perspective, because the reality is it comes back to recognizing that we have all been endowed and made in the image of God, and therefore if we're made in the image of God, every creature needs to be respected as a creation of God. And I say that because very often if we operate from any other source and any other perspective, then folks have a tendency to justify all kinds of inhumanity against other creatures of God. And what I say is talk about slavery in this country, right? Where folks did not realize, did not believe that black folks were somehow fully human, and if they therefore were not fully human, they therefore could not fully be a child of God, which in effect justified slavery in this culture. And the reality is, when you're dealing with Jews, or you're dealing with Muslims, or you're dealing with folks in this country who claim to be believers in this country, the fact is they need to look deep into their hearts and to decide that whether they actually believe what they claim to believe. Because if you claim to believe what you claim to believe, then Gaza cannot be a prison camp, and Palestinians cannot be treated as less than human beings. And the fact is, it calls upon us as people of faith to lift up and to stand up and to make that outcry heard loud and clear. Now, it's always interesting to me that people who always talk about the Holocaust have no problems of imposing a Holocaust on another set of human beings. Now, there's an ethical and a moral problem with that. Because the fact is that if you understand what it is to be oppressed and murdered and killed and denied basic human rights, if you understand what that is, and if you understand that you are a child of God and that should not have happened to you, then you can't afford to let that happen to someone else. The scriptures always speak about, when they talk about the law in Judaism, they said, here's how you remember the law. Why? Because you once were. You once were hungry. You once were oppressed. Therefore, you can't do that to anyone else. And the fact is that we're really looking at, right now, a moral, ethical, and faith breach. Not only in Israel, but in this world. You cannot justify it. Matters of faith. Faith, because a government tends to sell fear. But one of the things that we know, people of faith, is that faith all the time overcomes fear. Or it should overcome fear. The Israeli government peddling fear to its citizens so that somehow they can justify and be silent towards the types of oppression that is imposed right now on the people of Gaza. It's a fear. But faith overcomes fear. If we're people of faith, we have to stand up and speak about what is right and what is just, and in a sense not succumb to fear. In faith, you cannot justify the denial of food, the denial of water or medicine or medical care or other basic needs to any other human creature, because we're all children of God. So we stand in solidarity as people of faith, as Christians.
Good morning. 1.5 million Palestinians living in Gaza are suffering the most extraordinary form of collective punishment, a war crime committed by the Israeli government, fully funded, fully aided by the United States government. This is a war crime on such epic proportions that it amounts to genocide and to attempted genocide against the Palestinian people. And if this were happening practically anywhere else in the world, there would be such an uproar in the United States and such sympathetic news coverage of tens of thousands of people trying desperately to climb over broken walls so that they can get food and medicine for their families and their children, or seeing family members that they have been kept from for 10 years. But here in the United States, where the government of the United States and the media of the United States completely supports and is behind the actions of the Israeli government, which acts as a proxy force for United States interests in the Middle East, there is almost silence. And where there is coverage, it's sort of dismissed as if it's just an unfortunate moment in an unfortunate war. But the people of the United States who are seeing some of this, and people of the United States who are contacting our offices, the Answer Coalition, the National Lawyers Guild, the Partnership for Civil Justice, who are coming out in the streets today and tomorrow, are horrified by what they are seeing. Because when they see the truth, they know that this is an injustice, an illegality of such a nature that's brought on by this government that they have to work to bring it to an end. In the late 1940s, in the heels and the aftermath of World War II, and of the horrific collective punishment and war crimes committed in World War II, there was an effort made, a historic effort, to sort of change the course and nature of war and to hold governments and people accountable. And one of the mechanisms that was put into place was the Geneva Conventions. And the Geneva Convention and the Fourth Geneva Convention makes it very clear that the conduct of the Israeli government, aided and abetted by the US government, is a war crime, that it is collective punishment, that it is illegal on all counts and all measures, and more so, as a war crime, that it must be punished as a war crime. The other mechanism that was put into place after World War II was the Nuremberg trials, where those who carried out those war crimes were held accountable. And yet we don't see anything like that. We see the Israeli government carrying out war crimes. We see the US government carrying out war crimes on a daily basis against the people of the Middle East, against the people of Iraq. And where is the accountability? It is time not only to bring an end to these war crimes and to rise up and stop them, but for us to hold our own trials. It's time for there to be a new generation of trials to bring these war criminals to justice. And that means the Israeli government, that means the government of the United States, that means George Bush, that means the people in his administration. It means the Democrats in Congress as well as the Republicans who stand by and do not care if Palestinians starve to death and are bombed and murdered. Nor do they care if that happens to the Iraqis every single day. But the people that do care are the vast majority of the people of the world who are standing up today and tomorrow as well as people across the United States. Because we are speaking out to say that we are not going to be silent in the face of these horrific, horrific actions. So we will see everyone in the streets today, tomorrow, and really every day that it takes, because we have the power to bring this to an end. And the people of the United States and the people of the world are joining together, because this doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve working people. It doesn't serve people around the world. The only people that this serves are those who are the tiny few in power who use racism as a mechanism to achieve world domination. That doesn't help any of us. And it's an ugly, ugly reality. But when we expose it, we have the ability to end it.